Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Philip. I went through a difficult marriage that slowly fell apart over time. After months of turbulence, I found out that my wife was cheating on me. When I confronted her about it, she didn't deny it. Instead, she became defensive and told me to leave the house, reminding me that it was given to her by her parents. I didn't argue. I quietly left. But what she didn't expect was everything that came after. I met Angela during a time in my life when everything felt uncertain. I had just started out in the corporate world, fresh out of school, trying to make sense of how things worked. I wasn't making much money, and I wasn't climbing the ladder as fast as I thought I would, but I was working hard, and I kept showing up every single day. Angela came into my life during that season. It started with small conversations about things we were interested in. It was that kind of connection that builds when you talk to someone who genuinely seems interested in knowing who you are, not just what you do. I would find myself looking forward to hearing her voice at the end of a long workday. After a few months of talking, we started dating. For me, it wasn't casual. I loved her. I didn't say it right away, but I felt it early. She brought a kind of calm into my life that I hadn't realized I needed. I was still uncertain about the future, but with her, things felt more grounded. And because of that, I was willing to give her everything I had. Whatever it took to make her feel valued, I did it. 3 years into dating, we decided to get married. We stood in front of family and friends and made commitment to one another. We didn't have it all figured out, but we had each other. And back then, that felt like enough. Her parents, who had always been more financially stable than mine, pulled us aside after the ceremony. That's when her father handed Angela a small, simple envelope with a key inside. He smiled and said, "This is your new beginning." At first, I didn't even fully understand what he meant. Later, I realized they had built a house and were giving it to her outright as a wedding gift. Fully paid off. No mortgage. No hidden conditions. Apparently, they'd planned it years in advance, saving and building quietly, and had it ready just in time for our big day. To be honest, I was stunned. At that point in our lives, Angela and I were still renting a small apartment. That gift was life-changing. It meant we could start our marriage without the crushing pressure of monthly rent or a looming mortgage. I didn't care that the house was technically gifted to her. We were building a life together, and this gave us breathing room. The first few months in that house were some of the most peaceful. There was balance. I remember thinking, this is what marriage is supposed to feel like. Back then, we were just two people trying to grow, side by side. That house felt like a foundation of hope, stability, and shared dreams. I had no idea that years down the line, it would be the very thing used against me. Looking back, I can't say our marriage broke overnight. Over the years, I began to notice changes in the attitude of my wife. I was career-driven, yes, but not obsessed. I believed in putting in the work, but also making time for the people you love. That time mattered to me. At some point, Angela started to match or even exceed the career energy I was putting into work. And on the surface, I respected it. She was passionate, smart, and I wanted to be the kind of husband who encouraged her growth. But the problem wasn't that she became ambitious. It was how that ambition began to take over everything else. She started working later and later. At first, it was the occasional late night at the office. Then it became the norm. She'd say things like, "This project is high priority," or "We have a team strategy meeting," or "We're going off-site for training." Those trainings and events started happening out of town. First, once every couple of months. Then, almost every other week. And I kept trying to be supportive. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt watching her drift further and further from the home we shared. On the days when she was home, she was usually drained. Conversations were brief. We'd talk about things like who was picking up groceries, what bills were due, or which one of us needed to call a family member back. There was no warmth in it anymore. Intimacy disappeared. Not just physically. I mean the closeness, the inside jokes, the playful nudges, the simple "how was your day?" That meant something. It faded, and I started to feel like a background character in my own marriage. What made it even harder was that I didn't know how to bring it up without sounding selfish. She was chasing success, and I knew how much that meant to her. So I swallowed a lot of the frustration, trying to believe it was just a phase. There's something deeply unsettling about living in the same house with someone who no longer talks to you like they used to. At first, it was just small things. But over time, it got worse. Real conversations became rare, and when we disagreed on anything, it would escalate faster than it used to. And once the argument hit that boiling point, Angela would shut down completely. No explanations. No attempts to resolve it. Just silence for days, sometimes a whole week, acting as if I didn't exist in the same space. During these silent stretches, I noticed she was always glued to her phone. She'd be typing, smiling faintly sometimes, and whenever I came close, the screen would tilt just slightly or the app would close. It didn't happen once or twice, it was a pattern. And I wasn't allowed to ask about it. She'd immediately get defensive, telling me I was being paranoid or too controlling. And then the silence would start all over again. I was carefully choosing when and how to speak, just to avoid another wall of silence. We weren't always like this. There was a time when we could sit and talk for hours about nothing. I could feel the space between us growing, but I didn't know how to stop it. Nothing I did seemed to reach her anymore. One quiet evening, I was home alone, just trying to unwind after another long day. Angela wasn't home. She'd gone out again for what she said was a work-related function. She'd been attending more and more of those lately, sometimes even in other states. I didn't question it anymore. I was alone in the living room when I noticed her iPad on the couch. It was nothing unusual. She often used it to stream media when she wasn't glued to her phone. I picked it up, just intending to watch something on Netflix, and clear my head. As I tapped around, I couldn't even recall how exactly I landed in the Messages app. It wasn't intentional, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The iPad was connected to her iCloud account, so all the messages from her phone were synced automatically. At first, I didn't know what I was looking at. Then I saw a name I recognized, her coworker. The same man she used to mention casually back when things between us were still warm. I never once saw him as a threat, but the messages said otherwise. There were check-ins between them, asking if the other got home safe. Discussions about when they'd see each other next. Then full arrangements, where to meet, what hotel, how long they'd stay. And that's when I saw it clearly. One of those trips she said was a work seminar in another state was actually a weekend getaway with him. I sat there stunned. My wife was going all out for another man behind my back. And suddenly, everything added up. The extra effort she'd been putting into her appearance before leaving for work. The sudden obsession with traveling out of town. The nights she came home and could barely look me in the eye. The fake seminars that didn't show up in any of her company's official calendars. The way she clutched her phone like it held her entire identity. And all the while, I was the one walking on eggshells, afraid to ask questions because I didn't want to seem insecure. That night, I felt something in me break. But I didn't lose it. I didn't confront her right away. I knew her well enough to know she'd twist it. If I just showed her the messages, she'd find a way to make herself the victim. And if I didn't have enough to corner her, she'd deny everything and somehow flip the blame back to me. I shut the iPad and sat with the weight of what I had just seen. I needed more. Not just proof, but a plan. Because what I saw wasn't just cheating. It was disrespect at a level I never thought I'd experience in my own home. I needed more undeniable proof to add to this, so I hired a private investigator and, at the same time, talked to a lawyer about what a divorce might mean for me. The investigator spent weeks watching Angela's movements, and each report he sent broke my heart. Finally, he handed me proof I couldn't ignore. Photos and videos of Angela and her co-worker together outside the office at places they shouldn't be. Their company, where both of them held senior positions, had clear rules against that kind of relationship. Armed with everything, I chose one quiet evening to talk. When Angela walked in, I asked her to sit down. I kept my voice steady and asked, "What's really going on between you and your coworker?" At first, she sat in silence, staring like she didn't understand the question. Then she accused me of trying to control her, said I had no right to question who she talked to. I didn't argue. I simply held up my phone and showed her the screenshots from her iPad. She read them, and her face tightened. Instead of explaining, she shot back that I had invaded her privacy by snooping. She declared right there that our marriage was finished because I didn't respect her. Then she told me to leave the house. She reminded me it was a gift from her parents and said I had no claim to stay. I listened, said nothing, and felt the last thread between us snap. I had the answers I needed. I knew from the moment I found those messages that there was no saving this marriage. And honestly, I had a strong feeling that when I confronted Angela, she would try to flip the script, act like I was the one who wronged her. That's why I didn't just sit around hoping things would blow over. I prepared myself, quietly. Before I even brought up the affair to her, I had already started looking for a place to stay. It wasn't easy because I wanted to leave the house without giving her the satisfaction of a dramatic scene. The day after I confronted her and she told me to leave, I simply packed my things and walked out. So I booked a room at a nearby hotel and kept looking for a small apartment or rental where I could settle in. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I wasn't ready for their questions or opinions. I needed time to process everything on my own. A few days later, I signed the divorce papers and had them delivered to her. I wasn't sure if she had started preparing her own, but I wasn't about to wait and find out. I made the first move. Once the paperwork was in motion, I went ahead and froze our joint accounts. I didn't want to wake up one morning and see our money drained out or spent on whatever plans she had with the man she was cheating with. Of course, she tried to push back, claimed she had rights to certain things, tried to make it seem like I was reacting out of emotion. But the truth is that her infidelity wasn't something she could spin into a misunderstanding. It was clear. It was deliberate. And it was damaging. The divorce process wasn't quick. It took months. Anyone who has been through it knows how slow and stressful it can be. Every little thing becomes paperwork. Assets had to be split, legally, fairly. I didn't try to take what wasn't mine, but I made sure I wasn't cheated out of what I had helped build during the marriage. I listened to my lawyer. I followed every piece of advice carefully. Once the divorce was almost finalized and everything was already divided up between us, I did something that Angela and her lover didn't see coming. I filed a lawsuit against her coworker for alienation of affection. That's a legal term some states still recognize. It basically means I held him responsible for interfering in my marriage and playing a direct role in destroying it. I wasn't just angry that he slept with my wife. I was holding him accountable for the part he played in breaking something sacred I had spent years building. Now, I didn't rush into it emotionally. I waited until things were almost settled legally between me and Angela. I wasn't about to risk the divorce dragging on or affecting the way our assets were divided. But once I was in the clear and my lawyer gave me the go-ahead, I filed the paperwork. I had already gotten evidence through the private investigator. Not long after the court summons was delivered, her lover reached out to me directly, panicked. He asked if we could find a way to settle outside of court. Said he didn't want this mess reaching his workplace or affecting his family. I could hear the fear in his voice. He knew the fallout was going to be massive if this became public. But I wasn't moved. I just made it clear that the lawsuit would go forward as planned. Then Angela called me for the first time in a long while, pretending like she wanted to make peace. But it wasn't really about peace. She was trying to downplay everything, acting like I was dragging things out unnecessarily. She said the marriage was already over, that filing the lawsuit was too much, that I didn't have to take it this far. I listened. And then I told her plainly, "You don't get to decide how far I go. You made your choices. Now I make mine. If the court ruled in my favor, then so be it. If the public found out, that was on them. But what I wasn't going to do was let it all slide just because they were suddenly uncomfortable. Once the lawsuit became official, word started spreading because it was documented, serious, and public. Angela and her lover both held higher-up positions. The kind of roles that came with responsibilities, visibility, and policies, especially strict ones about workplace relationships. Their company had a clear code of conduct against affairs between senior staff, especially if it created a conflict of interest or damaged the company's image. They had broken that code. Repeatedly. Now, I could have waited for the lawsuit to do all the talking, but I didn't want to leave anything to chance. So I took one more step. I compiled all the evidence I had and sent it anonymously to the company's HR department. It didn't take long. Within a week or so, I started hearing whispers from mutual contacts. The company had launched a formal investigation. Angela and her lover were both quietly suspended while the matter was being reviewed, but I knew what was coming. Then came the lawsuit verdict. I won. I didn't celebrate like I'd won a jackpot because, truthfully, the money wasn't the reason I filed in the first place. And when the lawsuit made headlines in certain circles, their company couldn't ignore it anymore. They were forced to act. Not long after, both Angela and her lover were terminated from their roles. The damage had reached their front doors. Angela found out before I did. She got the email, the letter, whatever it was. And shortly after, I got a message from her. A long, emotional text filled with insults and pure rage. She called me all sorts of names, accused me of ruining her life, said I was heartless, said I didn't have to go that far. But I didn't respond, because in that moment, I knew something she didn't. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet, cold reminder that actions have weight. Looking back now, I wouldn't wish that kind of betrayal on anyone. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the way it all unfolded. The silence, the lies, the cold distance that crept in so gradually. Being kicked out of a home I once believed we built together. Being blamed for snooping instead of being respected enough to be told the truth. It was a lot. But here's the thing. I kept my head clear, even when my heart was a mess. And I used my pain as fuel. And I let the truth speak louder than any emotion ever could. In the end, justice was served. Her lover got what was coming to him. And she lost the job she used as an excuse to neglect the marriage in the first place. I don't feel sorry for how it turned out. Not anymore. Because when someone tries to break you and you come out of it standing taller than before, there's nothing more powerful than that. So, thank you for listening.